Hello and welcome. Today we're doing a question from LeetCode called Interleaving String. This is a medium. We're going to jump right into it. So given strings S1, S2, and S3, we want to find whether S3 is formed by an interleaving of S1 and S2. An interleaving of two strings S and T is a configuration where S and T are divided into N and M substrings respectively, such that S equals S1 plus S2 all the way up until Sn, and same with T, right? T equals T1, T2 all the way to T of N. We're basically just taking our strings and separating them into chunks. The absolute value of n minus m is going to be less than or equal to 1, and the interleaving is S1 plus T1 plus S2 plus T2 all the way through, or T1 plus S1, T2 plus S2 all the way through. This just means we want to maintain that same relative order that we're getting those chunks in. So if we're taking that first chunk in S1, then we take one from T1, we have to take the next one from S2. For example, we can't take the very last character of S1 and then the first one, right? It has to be in the same order of that string. And note, A plus B is the concatenation of strings A and B. So example 1, we have S1 being A, B, C, C, S2 being D, B, B, C, A. Can we interleave these two strings to form S3 of A, D, B, B, C, B, C, A, C? We can, right? And we see that in this example. We're going to take the first two characters of S1, then the first four of S2, followed by the next two from S1, then the last one from S2, and finally the last character of S1. And we output true. Example 2, this is S1, this is S2. Can we interleave these to form our S3? Well, to visualize this a little bit better, say we have them over here, S1, S2, and S3. We know that very first character is an A, so say we take it from S1. Then we need another A, so we're going to take this one from S1 again. Then we want a D, so we can take this D over here. Then we want 3B. So say we take the first B from S1, then the only option for the next B is from S2. This is a C over here. We can't take that. So we take a B from here and a B from here as well. But now we need an A, and neither S1 or S2 have an A, so we're going to output false. We can't actually interleave these to make S3. And finally, example 3, we have S1 being empty, S2 also being empty, S3 is empty. Of course, we can make this, so we are going to output true. Okay, so how are we going to solve this? Say the very first thought that comes to us is we start at the beginning of both S1 and S2. We have two pointers, and we just iterate through, seeing what character we can take to form S3. So say we had the following example. This is S1, S2, and S3. Going through this character by character, right? We are at our first character. We want an A. We can go either way. Say we go with the first string, so we use this A over here. So we have one A down so far. The next character we want is also an A. Say we take the A from S1, which means we have two A's, and our next character in S1 would be D, and the next one in S2 would be still an A. The next character we want is a D. We can take that from here, and we want another A. So say we take it from here again. At this point, we are out of characters. We have nothing in S1 anymore, so we just want to look at S2. The next character we want is an M. Now, here, the only thing available to us is an A. There's nothing in here, and S2 only has an A. So we should be outputting false, right? It's not possible, but it is possible to make this S3 with S1 and S2. What we would do is take the first three characters of S1, so we have our AAD down, then take the A from S2, then MA from S2 again, and finally the last A from S1, and the last character from S2. In this way, we're actually able to make this output. So it does matter which character we take from what string in order to make our interleaving, which means we want to try out all of our possible combinations. Now, trying out all possible combinations could get repetitive, right? Say we have the following example. S1 has 3 A's, S2 has 3 A's, and S3 has 6 A's. Of course, we know it's going to be true. Doesn't matter what letter we're picking from what string. We will be always able to interleave S1, S2 to form S3. We're not really concerned about which interleaving we pick. It could have been 3 from S1, then 3 from S2, 2 from S1, all 3 from S2, and then that last one from S1. We're only concerned about whether or not we can actually interleave these together. So we just want to output true or false. So say now we had a modification to our example. Say we have an additional M in S1 and in S3. Well, we know we were able to form everything we had before this additional character over here, right? We're for sure able to make these 6 letters in S3 from an interleaving of S1 and S2. And it doesn't matter which interleaving that was, right? Again, it could have been the first 3 S1, then the 3 S2. It could have been 2 S1, 3 S2, and then 1 S1. Doesn't matter, we know that this is possible. So all we need to do for this extra character is see if we can get it from either S1 or S2. S2 doesn't have any more characters, so does S1 have a character that is M? It does, right? So we can use that to make our interleaving. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to go character by character from either S1 or S2 and see if that's the character we need for our next one in S3, assuming we were able to make everything before that character in S3. So in order to do this is going to be a dynamic programming problem. We're going to be using a 2D DP array. One last example just to see our DP array played out. Say we have S1 being AM, S2 being ADA, and S3 being ADAMA. What we want to do is have a table for every single character in S1, say going across, and then every single character in S2 going down. So it would look like the following, right? If we have 0 characters from S1, there's no letter. If we have 1 character from S1, it's just the A. If we have 2, it would be M as well. And same thing going down for S2, we have 0 characters, which is going to be nothing. Then we have 1, which is A, then D, and then A. Now with this table, what we're going to do is see if we're able to make S3 with an interleaving of S1 and S2. So say we're taking the first 0 characters of S1, the first 0 of S2. This means we have 0 characters in total we want to form. So taking the first 0 characters of S3, that's going to be none, right? None plus none is going to equal none. So this is true. We can interleave S1 and S2 into S3 if we're looking at 0 total characters. So this is true. Now moving on to this cell, say we want to take 1 character from S1 and 0 from S2. We use this to form the first 1 character of S3. We're taking 1 from S1, 0 from S2, which means we're taking a total of 1 character. So we want to see if we can form that very first character of S3. And we know we can do that, right? It's just going to be that A. It does match S3, so this is going to be true. All we did is added A to that empty that we had before. Now moving on, we want to use 2 characters from S1, 0 from S2. Can we do this? We can't, right? The second character in S3 had to be a D, but we are an M, so this is not going to be possible. It's going to be false because the only string we can make is AM together, but we wanted an AD. Now moving down to our next row, we're going to take 0 characters from S1 and 1 from S2. This puts our total character count at 1, so we want to see if we can make that first character of S3. This is an A and we only want an A, so this is going to be true. We can use this A to form the first A of S3. Moving down to cell 1, we want to take 1 character from S1 and 1 from S2. 2 characters in total, which means we want to look at that second character we have in S3. This needs to be a D, so we need to have either a D in S1 or S2, but they're not Ds, so we know it's not going to work. If we wanted to use the A from S1, we would have added another A to what we had already. So we already had 1 A, which means we would have made an AA, but we wanted an AD. And same thing, if we wanted to use this A from S2, we would have added another A from the one above here, and this still would have been an AA. So using 1 character from both S1 and S2, we can't make the first 2 of S3. Now our next box over here. Can we take 1 character from S2 and 2 from S1 to interleave them and form the first 3 characters of S3? We can't do that. And why is that? We need an A as our third character in S3. So either we get it from S1 or S2. We do see an A over here, so we can add an A from S2. And if we want to add this A, we want to see what we had right before this A. So we check the row above us for that. So we're going to check what we had before this character over here. We had an AM. That was false, right? We actually couldn't make the first 2 characters of S3. So even with this A, we're not going to be able to make the first 3 characters of S3. And that's because this was AM, not AD. So we can't do it from over here because we would get AMA. Now, what about adding this character as our third for S3? If we want to use M, we know right away it's not going to match. We need an A, but we have an M. But even if this was an A, we would be coming from something that was false. If we want to add this character, what we have before the use of this character should have at least been true. But it's not, right? We only had AA and we wanted AD. So again, this is going to be false. Now moving to the cell over here, we're going to be at 0, 2, meaning we want to take 0 characters from S1 and 2 from S2 and see if we can form the first 2 characters of S3. We can do this, right? We have a D over here. The second character in S3 is a D. and we were able to make whatever we had before that in S3 since we have a true up here. So this is also going to be true, and all that's happening is we're adding a D to what we had in this cell over here, what we had from 0 characters of S1 and 1 from S2. We were able to form an A, so to that we're just going to add a D. So this is true. Moving on, how many characters are we working with? We're working with 1 from S1 and 2 from S2. So this is going to total 3 characters. We want to see if we can make this part of S3. We have 2 options. And what are our 2 options? We can use either the character at S1 or S2. So we could have made the first 2 characters without using this character over here. So not using any character from S1, right? We have AD. And then to that, we're just going to add another A. Does that work, right? This was true. And our third character is an A, so this does work. Now that this works, we actually don't need to check the other way. We just need to know true or false. We're not concerned with all of the options, but if we were curious, the other way would not have worked. Other option was using S2. So seeing what we had over here and just adding a D to the end of that. So at this point, we could have only made an AA, which already was false. So adding a D to whatever we had here wasn't going to get us the first 3 characters of S3. So here what we're going to go with is just adding an A to what we already had from 0 characters of S1 and 2 of S2. So we get true over here. I'm moving down again, and I'm actually going to remove all these things we don't want to keep track of, all the combinations we get for false. And now we want to see if we can make the first 4 characters of S3 using the first 2 from S2 and first 2 from S1. We want to interleave these somehow to get the first 4 of S3. Now the only way to do that is either we take an M and add it on to whatever we had from the interleaving of 2 from here, 1 from here, or append a D to whatever we had from 1 from here and 2 from here. So checking out both options, if we just want to add in a D, that's not going to work because we were actually never able to make a successful interleaving before this D, right? This is false, meaning we had 2 characters from S1, 1 from S2, but we were never able to make an interleaving for the first 3 characters of S3. So this is going to be false. We can't actually add a D and make it true, right? It's never going to change that. So the only option is to look at our second choice. Can we add an M to whatever we had before? So the first 2 characters of S2 and 1 from S1. That is true, right? We were able to make an ADA and we need an M, so this is going to work. And using the first 2 characters of S1 and first 2 of S2, we can make the first 4 characters of S3. Now just filling out the very last row, we want to see if we can make the first 3 characters of S3, meaning we take 0 from S1 and 3 from S2. At this point, the only option for us is to look above us. There's nothing to the left. So we know we're just going to add A to whatever we have above us. We need 2 things to be true. Whatever we have before this character is true, and that's correct. And the character we are using matches what we want at that index. So we want our third character to be an A. That's true. This is an A, so this is going to be true. We can make ADA with 0 characters from S1 and 3 from S2. Now again, we want to check the first 4 characters of S3. We know we want an M, and this is true and this is true. So we could come from anywhere. We just want to make sure our character matches. And it doesn't, right? This is an A and we wanted an M. So this is going to be false because what would have happened is an ADAA. It doesn't matter which interleaving we pick. We're never going to be able to make ADAM from just 1 character of S1 and 3 from S2. So for that very last box, can we make an interleaving of S3 from 2 characters of S1 and 3 from S2? Basically all the characters we have at our disposal. Yes, we can. The last character we want is an A. So if we want to add this A, we want to make sure what we had before that, right before this row, right over here, was true. This is true, so we can form this interleaving. It's going to be ADAM followed by an A. And all we need to do is just return what we have in this very last box, true or false, to see if we can make this entire interleaving. Now that we know how to do this, let's go ahead and code this up. The first thing we want to do is actually check what our lengths are for S1 and S2. So N and M are going to be length of S1 and length of S2. What we want to do is check to make sure these lengths actually equal the length of S3. If it doesn't, right away we can output false, right? We're never going to be able to interleave this. So if N plus M does not equal length of S3, we return false. So now we know the lengths are equal. N plus M will equal the length of S3. We want to initialize our DP array. So DP is going to equal false for that entire range of its length. So for range in N plus 1. Because our length right now, say, is 2, we actually want 3 spots. So we're going to go N plus 1. And we're going to have all these characters, these 3 falses, for the number of characters in S2. So we're going to have another loop for range in m plus 1. So this is what DP looks like right now. It's all initialized to false. Now all we want to do is just loop through all the rows and columns in our table. So for r in range m plus 1, this is for the rows. For c in range n plus 1, this is going to be for the columns. We want to see if we are true or false. Now before starting, we also want to have our base case. So we're going to initialize 0, 0. If we take 0 characters from S1, 0 from S2, can we form the first 0 from S3? That's always true. It's always going to be none. So DP of 0, 0 going to equal true. Now that this is done, how do we see if we are true or false for any given cell? What we want to do is see where we're coming from. So first, if column is greater than 0, which means we are not in this first column over here, and we can actually check what is to the left of us. And DP of R C minus 1. So if we are at a column that is not 0, we can check what we have in the column before us, if that is true. And the character that we are trying to add matches the character we want in S3. So S1 at index C minus 1. Now, if we want to see the first character, we actually want what we have at the 0th index. It's offset by 1. So that's why we're subtracting 1 over here. We want to make sure S1 of C minus 1 equals what we have in S3 of C minus 1 plus R. Because we also want to see how many characters we're using from S2. If we are at this cell over here, it means we are using 1 character from S1 and 1 from S2. So we want to see what we have in that second character of S3, what we have at index 1. So 1 minus 1 is going to be 0, plus 1 equals 1, right? We're checking index 1. If this is equal, then DP of RC is going to be true. And we want to do the same thing the other way around. So elif R is greater than 0 and DP of R minus 1, what we have in the row before us, and C is true. So what we're coming from is true. And the character we have also matches. So S2 of R minus 1 equals S3 of R minus 1 plus C. If this is the case, then DP of RC will also be true. And in the end, all we want to do is just return what we have in this corner. So we're going to return DP of minus 1 and minus 1. Basically, can we form our interleaving once we have all the characters in S1 and S2 to our disposal? So let's go ahead and submit this. Runtime error, we have unmatched parentheses. Okay, we need an extra over here. So false. Oh, there should also be an in over here. In range n plus 1. In range m plus 1. Okay, now let's go ahead and submit this. Expected a colon, let's also add that in there. And it is accepted. Now talking about space and time complexity, for time we are going through all the characters in S1 for every character in S2. So if S1 is length n, S2 is length m, we're going through that entire table, so it's going to be n times m. And for space, it's going to be the same thing. We're making a table as big as n times m. Now, if you do want to see a walkthrough of our example line by line, we're going to do a super quick example. Say this is our input S1, this is S2, and this is S3. Going through this line by line, n and m are going to be the lengths respectively, so they're both 2. 2 plus 2 does equal 4, so we don't output false. Now we initialize our DP array, so it's going to look like the following, right? It's going to have 3 spots. We go up until n plus 1, so 0, 1, 2, not including 3. And same thing for our rows. So it's initialized to be all false. Now we set the first one to be true. Now looping through this, we start off with row being 0. C is also 0. If C greater than 0, that's not true. Elif R greater than 0, also not true. We go back in this for loop, move C down to 1. This is true. C is now greater than 1. And DP of R, C minus 1, so what we had to the left of us, this is also true. Now we just want to make this check over here. So S1 of C minus 1. C is 1. S1 at 0 is a D. Does this equal what we have in S3 of C minus 1 plus R? So 1 minus 1 is 0, plus 0 is 0. What we have in the 0th index of S3. These are equal, right? They're both D, so this is going to be true. Now, since this if is true, we don't go in this elif, we go back in this for loop. C is now 2, so this is true. DP of R, C minus 1, this is also true. We check for the character, so S1 at index 1 is a 1, and S3 at index 1 is also an E, so this is going to be true again. There's nothing else for us to go through for columns. We're at the end, so we go back into this for loop and move R down. So R equals 1 and C equals 0, we're over here. We make a check if C greater than 0. That's not true, so we go here. If R greater than 0, that is true. R is 1. And dp of R minus 1C, so what we had before this row right over here, this is also true. And S2 of R minus 1, so what we have at index 0 for S2, this is E. Does this equal S3 of R minus 1 plus C? So 1 plus 0 minus 1 is 0. Does E equal D? It does not, so we don't mark this as true. Instead, we go back in our for loop. So we're over here, C is greater than 0, it's 1. dp of R, C minus 1. This is not true, this is false. So we actually don't need to continue checking this. We are already false, meaning we go in this condition. R is greater than 0, it's 1. Is dp of R minus 1C true? Over here, that is true, right? What we had just above us is true. Now we check for the character. So S2 of R minus 1. So S2 at index 0, which is E, does this equal S3 of R minus 1 plus C? So 1 minus 1 is 0, plus 1 is 1. Does this equal what we have here? It does, right? They're both E, so this is going to be true. We can form the first two characters of S3 using one character from S1 and one from S2. This makes sense, right? This is going to be DE, and we have a DE. Moving down, going in this for loop, C is now at index 2. It is greater than 0. dp of R, C minus 1, so what we had in the column just before us. This is also true. Now we want to check the character. S1 of C minus 1. This is an E over here. Does this equal S3 of C minus 1 plus R? So C is 2, R is 1. So index 2. At index 2, we have an E, so this is true. Using one character from S2 and 2 from S1, we can form the first 3 of S3, which is D, E, E. Now, since we went in this if, we don't need to go in this elif, so we go back in this for loop, but there's no more columns for us to go to, so we go back in this bigger for loop and move down our row. So we are now at row 2, and our column is 0. Column is not greater than 0, so we can't go in this if, we go in this elif. Row is greater than 0, dp of row minus 1c, this is false, so we don't go in here, go in the for loop. We check in this cell over here, c is greater than 0, dp of r, c minus 1 is false, we go in this elif. R is greater than 0, dp of r minus 1, c, this is true. And S2 at index 1 is a P. Does this equal S3 at index 2? It does not. This is an E, so this is going to remain false. We can't use the first character from S1 and the first 2 from S2 to actually form the first 3 from S3. This is a D, E, and P, and we needed a D, E, E. So going back in our for loop for the last time, C is index 2. We go in this if condition, C is greater than 0. dp of R, C minus 1, this is false, so we don't go in this if condition, we go in this elif instead. R is greater than 0, dp of R minus 1C. What we had in that same column index, just a row above us, this is true, meaning we want to see if we can add this character in to whatever we had up until now. So we just want to see what that character is, right? Does P, what we have in S2 of R minus 1, so index 1 of S2, does this P equal S3 of R minus 1 plus C? So what we have in index 3, so P over here does equal this P, so this is going to be true. And all we want to do is return what we have in this very last index, which is going to be true. So we just went ahead and solved interleaving string. If you have any questions, let me know down below. If this video was helpful, like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really supports the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next one.